Okay. All right, well, good morning, everyone. It's 9:30, so we're going to get started. I'm Celeste Carmichael, and I want to warmly welcome you to the Building Campus-County Connection webinar series. I know that we have lots of folks that tune into this monthly, but if you're joining us for the first time, I will share that the whole idea of these Campus-County Connection webinar series, the monthly webinar series is really intended to just help you know a little bit about, it could be staff or faculty that are doing great programs here on campus. It could be really intriguing and integrated county and campus events. But, you know, these webinars are really intended to be a peripheral knowledge builder to just help you know a little bit about something that is happening that we want you to be aware of. There may be opportunities for you to follow up with presenters in the series, or opportunities for your PWTs to work on particular issues together. So that's the idea. We don't expect this to be a skill building webinar as much as just a knowledge building webinar. So welcome. We're really excited to have Dr. Vicki Bogan here this morning, and she's going to share a little bit about her research and some of the work that she's doing, and has some questions for you. So I hope that you'll be engaged, take some time. There'll be some slides that are particularly there to help you connect and think about and respond to, but you're welcome to chat and questions at any time. So I apologize. I see the note from Susan Hoskins that the original email didn't work this morning, and I'm not sure what happened there, but I did send a follow-up email out. Going to just so you know, if you're tuning into these Campus County Connection webinars, anytime if you just go directly to the Event Center in WebEx, you can join from there. But I apologize. That's where I got the email address from. I'm not sure what happened there, but I'm glad you're on. So welcome, welcome. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And let me just pull up our chat so I can be aware of that. Is everybody looking at a slide that says post-recession financial strategies for families? It's going to give me a verification that you're looking at the right slide. Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right. So with that, Dr. Bogan, I'm going to pass it right on to you.
Well, thank you, Celeste, for inviting me to speak at this webinar. This is my first webinar, so it's very exciting for me. I hope that everybody can hear me okay, and if not, just send a chat and tell me to speak up. I have a bit of a cold today. So as Celeste mentioned, I'm Vicki Bogan. I'm a professor at Cornell University. I focus on financial issues. I have a Ph.D. in economics, also an MBA from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. And so throughout most of my professional and academic career, I have been focused with mathematical or finance issues. I'm also the director of the Institute for Behavioral and Household Finance, and I'll be mentioning that a couple times throughout this presentation as an opportunity for resources related to household finance. I encourage you to follow the Institute on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is IBHF1, and every week I try to tweet out some interesting or important or key advice or tips on household finance. Today I have posted some tips on managing debt. So I encourage you to follow the Institute at IBHF1. I teach finance courses at Cornell, so since I'm a professor, I'm used to being asked questions, so I really would like to encourage everybody during the webinar to ask any questions. I'm used to being interrupted. I know that's not possible through this webinar setup, but if you want to ask a question at any time, I'd be happy to stop and address the issue. I understand that I'm speaking with a lot of firm PWT educators, and I really just want to say at this time, I'm happy to be able to talk to you. You guys do such great and important work, and hopefully I would be able to serve as a resource for you. This is important work because one of the biggest sources of stress and unhappiness in people's lives comes from problems related to money. The data indicates that. And so I'm going to talk about, post-recession financial strategies for families, and really strategies to take people from the picture on the left to the picture on the right that you're looking at right now. And we're going to start, since I'm framing this talk in the context of the recession, I want to start out by providing a little data on from the last 5 recessions. And so we see from the graph that the Great Recession had an enormous impact on household finances in the way that most recessions do. But what's unique about this most recent recession is, compared to other recessionary periods, the recovery has not been as quick. Households have not bounced back as quickly as they have in the past. If you look at the recessions in the 70s and the percent changes in median household income in the first 2 years after recovery, you see in the 70s, the first 2 years of recovery, household income was able to rebound and go up. The same thing with one of the recessions in the 80s. In the 90s and early 2000s, we see the recovery was not as quick in the first 2 years, but for this most recent recession, we see that households haven't recovered and haven't bounced back. And so what happened with households? And to provide some information and answer that question, let's go back to around 1986, when households started accumulating debt and eroding their liquid assets. And so it was 30 years ago that people started accumulating more and more debt. And by 2007, before the Great Recession, households were increasing debt at a rate equivalent to 6% of aggregate consumption every year. And so this rate of increasing debt had been accelerating over time. And so then when we get to the recession, we have the largest simultaneous decline in the value of housing and equities, which is stocks. I'll use those words interchangeably. Sorry for being a finance geek. But the financial crisis caused a substantial erosion in household wealth through this simultaneous decline in value of housing. So housing prices dropped and the stock market dropped as well. And so during 2008, it resulted in one of the largest deleveraging periods in recent history. And so we talked about that number of debt accumulation being, in 2007, 6% every year. It dropped from 6% to -4% of aggregate consumption. And so we see debt accumulation dropped, as well as liquid asset holdings declined almost by a factor of 2. And so one of the reasons that the work you do is so important is because we're dealing with a slightly different situation after this last recession. The recession was a great recession. Households haven't been bouncing back as quickly, and partly it's because that they had accumulated such high debt before, and also we have this significant erosion of housing wealth and stock wealth. So I wanted to pause here and just ask a question to the group, because I know this is a group of educators. What is your current focus with respect to household financial education?
So if you can take a moment to just chat in and reply to Vicki's question, what's your current focus with respect to household financial education? So if you're an educator that's working in this issue, how are you addressing this right now? What's your focus? If you want to make sure you set your chat to all participants, that will allow everybody to see your response. That would be great. And if it's an area that you're not working on, but want to, or an area that's not, you're just interested in the topic, that's okay. Let us know. So we have one response so far. I typically work with limited income families, individuals to provide education on budgeting with a limited income. Okay. Keep them coming. Currently providing any education, we aren't currently providing any education in this area, just interested in learning and considering what options we might have. Great. Thank you, Bev. Another? Okay. Working after school, looking for information to teach students on budgeting and effectively managing money. Yeah, it starts early, doesn't it? I think the overspending starts early too.
Yes, I think. So that's what you're doing is very important. Budgeting and planning is super important, and that's kind of the first step to get households to start becoming more financially literate. And so I applaud you for working those areas, and it kind of links to what we're going to talk about today, because obviously when households are budgeting, they're budgeting for a reason and for a purpose. And going forward, there's some things that households can focus on with regard to their budget to help their financial situations. And so today, I'm going to talk about some key aspects where households can focus in terms of wealth accumulation and debt reduction. Okay. So let's talk about wealth and wealth accumulation first. And again, apologize for being a professor, but I'm going to start with some statistics and some data to really give you a context and set the stage for our discussion today.
It's okay, we love statistics.
Okay, great.
It helps us identify the need, right? So if any of our educators are working on any grant proposals or whatever, the data is super important.
Awesome,
yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about some data from the U.S. Census Bureau. It says that median household net worth in the United States in 2011 was about $68,000 a year. And so when we think about wealth accumulation, oftentimes we focus on budgeting and just income, but with regard to, someone mentioned they work with low-income families, when we think about wealth inequality or inequality in general, inequality with regard to wealth is even more extreme than inequality with regard to income. And so today I'm going to focus on a lot of information centering on wealth and wealth accumulation. And when we think about inequality with regard to wealth as opposed to income, the disparity can be very extreme when we think about it with regard to different ethnic groups. And so this is, again, it's from the same year of U.S. Census data that shows the significant disparity in U.S. median net worth by racial group. And so we think about Caucasian bar is the extreme left. Median net worth is over $110,000, but when we talk about Hispanic or African American, it's in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. Okay, and so I wanted to ask another question this time. Where do you think people get or hold their wealth? Where do you think people's wealth is stored? Is it stocks or real estate or?
So this is the interactive portion. We apologize that it's that we can't just put all of this in audio, but I know that the audio is the biggest issue with WebEx sometimes. So, all right, the answers are coming in. Real estate, home and cars, primary residence. And there was another response that came into the earlier question from Kristen Colarusso, that we provide job readiness training to county residents applying for public assistance. So
okay.
Just a little more information on that one. iPhone.
Okay. So actually, you guys are really on top of things because a lot of people hold their wealth in real estate or primary residence, as you indicated. And I'll talk about that in a few slides. But with regard to wealth accumulation, where people get their wealth, there are a few essential elements. So you might not know this. This is surprising to a lot of people that over the lifetime, about 30% of American households receive a wealth transfer that accounts for close to 40% of their net worth. Okay, and so a lot of times it's just an inheritance that accounts for a lot of individual household wealth. And this is important to understand, particularly if you're working with lower income households, because this isn't an option, okay? And you don't have much control over this aspect. But there are some things that one can do and households can do now to accumulate wealth if you can't rely on a huge inheritance. And another essential element of wealth accumulation is the number of years an individual household has been consistently investing at all. Slow and steady wins the race when we're thinking about investing. And so you do not have to have a lot of money, but just consistently start early and consistently invest. And then another consideration is the portion of your funds that are allocated to higher return investments such as stocks. And so we'll talk about investing in some of the specifics later, because oftentimes for households, investing in the stock market is scary, especially now when it's been up and down and so volatile. So we'll talk about some strategies later along in the talk. In terms of your responses to the earlier question, you guys nailed it. For most households, the three major components of wealth are home equity, as you mentioned. You might not think about it, but 401k plans or any type of retirement plans, and then equity holdings, and those are stock holdings. And so I'd like to talk about each one of these components in turn and how well you can think about increasing wealth through each of them. And so let's start with, someone mentioned the primary residence and home equity. Let's start with home ownership and home equity. Buying a home can be a good financial move, but households need to be smart about it. It's not the case that buying a home is the right idea for everyone. And it's not the case that buying just any home is the right idea for every household. In most cases, you should consider buying a home only when you plan to stay in it for several years, and that's because there are a lot of upfront fixed costs, and you need to stay in there to recoup your fixed costs. So if you're not planning to stay in the home more than 2 or 3 years, perhaps it's better to rent at this point in your life. The other issue is the monthly cost of your home, including taxes, maintenance, and other costs. Oftentimes, households, they don't think about, okay, can I afford this mortgage payment, but they're not thinking about, can I also afford the taxes? And, as a homeowner myself, there's always something to do. There's always some cost associated, maintenance costs associated with a home. And so when you do an estimate of that, when you're doing your budgeting, it shouldn't exceed 28% of your monthly income. Okay. Also, most people, when they're purchasing a house, housing prices are pretty high. Most people don't have $200,000 lying around to purchase a house or purchase the majority of a home, and so you have to take a mortgage. And so clearly understanding what type of mortgage is best is really important for households. And I really want to emphasize and stress this particular issue in terms of wealth accumulation, wealth building. To actually build wealth through your primary residence, you need to be careful what type of mortgage you get. Obviously, don't take a mortgage in which you can't afford the monthly payment. But in these past few years since the housing bubble, there are a lot of, I call it crazy types of mortgages that really need to discourage people from taking. Any mortgage where you're not paying the principal, it's an interest-only mortgage, stay away, run. Those are bad mortgages. Don't take those. What that means is when you have interest-only mortgages, you're not building wealth. You're just paying interest. You're not building equity in those types of mortgages. And so those are not mortgages that help a household build equity through the primary residence. Also, it's important to understand the risks associated with different types of mortgages. ARMs, which I have up on the slide, those are adjustable rate mortgages. Those are very attractive because the interest rate is lower than the interest rate on most fixed rate mortgages. The issue with that is that those interest rates can go up. The households are exposing themselves to interest rate risk when they take on adjustable rate mortgages. And that's nice when interest rates keep going down and down and down. But interest rates have kind of bottomed out at this point in the economy, and there is a real probability that the interest rates will start creeping up. And when that happens, your monthly mortgage payment is going to go up. And so understanding that from the wealth building perspective, but also from the budgeting perspective that you mentioned earlier, is really critical. Another aspect of wealth accumulation that I mentioned in the previous slide, this slide, is retirement plans. And I put 401k plans, but there are other kinds of retirement plans. And so I wanted to ask the group a question. What % of income should households save for retirement?
So once again, just take a moment to chat. And we've had a few people just join us. So if you're just joining us, welcome. We are here with Dr. Vicki Bogan. And, you know, we have there's some slides that are particularly for some interaction, so we invite that, but you're welcome to ask questions at any time. So the responses are coming in, Vicki, 20%, 15%, 15%, 10%.
Okay, this is a smart group. So when people ask me that, the real answer is it depends. And it depends on a lot of factors. At this point, I actually wanted to direct you to, I mentioned I'm the director for the Institute for Behavioral and Household Finance. As part of that institute, there's a website, and the website is actually listed on the, is it the registration page?
Right, it's on the page for Campus County Connections. And actually, when we get done with your slides, we can go and visit your website just so everybody can take a look and we can look at it together.
But the website for the institute has a Household Finance 101 video series.
Oh, and they're wonderful.
And they're very short, you know, 2 to 3 minute clips that give you information on specific topics. How retirement planning is one of them, investing, saving, 529 college savings plans. So they're financial experts, certified financial planners, and various experts that we have short little video clips that provide very good information. And so if you visit the website, there's a really good video by a certified financial planner and a Cornell alum, Jordan Zalkupa, who talks about how to think about what percentage you should save for retirement. The short answer, and most of you got it, is about 15%. But it does depend on a lot of factors, and this is something that households need to think about individually based on the dynamics of their household. But there are some things that we can say for certain about saving for retirement. And what we can say for certain is you need to make sure that you are putting your money in some type of retirement saving vehicle. There are a lot of different types of retirement savings options out there. I'll talk about some of the main categories that I have listed on this slide. The first one are defined benefit plans, and that really, those are types of retirement plans that are going away. Fewer and fewer companies are offering a defined benefit plan option. And so when I talk to my students about this, I say, this is your grandma's retirement plan, where you work for a company for 20, 30 years, you retire, they give you a gold watch, and they say, you know, you have this pension and we're going to write you a check every month until you die. Okay? You don't really have to think about or worry about how much you're going to save because you've just worked for this company and they kind of work in or bake in, you know, cost of living increases, et cetera. Okay? And so that's really the retirement plan that's on autopilot. Most companies don't have those kinds of plans anymore. Most companies have the voluntary contribution plan, the bullet right underneath, where you have an account and you're responsible for putting money into this account in addition to your firm. And you're also, these accounts often allow you to decide how the funds are directed and allocated, whether I have 25% going to stocks and 25% going to bonds and 25% going to real estate and 25% going to other. I'm not suggesting that as a strategy. I'm just saying you're responsible for deciding how the funds are allocated. These are very good things to take advantage of. Households need, if you have access to a voluntary contribution plan, sign up, do it. They're tax-advantaged accounts. That means the dollars go in pre-tax, so you don't have to pay taxes on the money that's put into the retirement accounts. The earnings are taxed upon withdrawal, and the benefit in that case is that presumably you're withdrawing the funds when you're retired and you're in a lower tax bracket. And so there are two benefits. When you have access, when households have access to a voluntary contribution plan, it's important for budgeting purposes to try to be able to contribute at least up to the corporate match or gift. So a lot of them, the way they work is that you can put in a certain percentage and the company will match the percentage that you put in up to a specific amount. So for example, if a company has a 5% match, that means if you put in 3%, the company will match your 3%. If you put in 2%, the company will match your 2%. If you put in 5%, your company will match your 5%. If they have a 5% match and you put in 10%, the company will just put in 5%. Okay. So understanding how your specific plan works, because it differs by company, but make sure that you put in a percentage equal to the company match. Otherwise, you're really just walking away from free money. That's a benefit that you have as an employee, and you should take full advantage of it. Individual retirement accounts are available for people that work in a job where they don't have access to voluntary contribution or defined benefit plan. You can still have an individual retirement account even if you do have access to a voluntary contribution plan, but you may or may not be eligible for the same tax benefits. Okay? But the point from this slide and the big takeaway that I want people to remember is you might not know exactly what percentage to do right away, but sign up for a retirement savings plan and do it as early as you can and contribute as much as you can. And just to give you a sense of the power of an early start, I have I have a little example here. If you begin saving at 25 and you put $2,000 a year in for 40 years, assuming an earnings growth of 8%, you'll have over $500,000, $560,000. Suppose you just wait 10 years and don't start at 25, but you put it off until you're 35, which a lot of people do, and you put in that same $2,000 a year for 30 years, assuming an earnings growth of 8%. So really, if you started putting away at 25, that $2,000 a year for 10 years is really the difference in money that you've had to spend. But the difference in money that you'll have when you retire is significant. You'll have less than half if you just delay your retirement savings by 10 years.
This is a great example as folks are working with, you know, whoever your audience is to share. You know, I can share my own experience. I remember as a brand new educator for cooperative extension, you know, fresh out of college, I had a colleague who really pushed me to, you know, think about retirement. And I thought to myself, oh, she's nuts. I'm only 20 years old. You know, I'm not thinking about retirement. I followed her advice because I just looked up to her, right? She was a good mentor to me. And I'm so glad that, you know, I did, because had she not reached out to say, you know, to just kind of pull me aside and ask, which retirement plan are you doing? And, you know, have you thought about this and this and this? I am sure that I would have just overlooked that. So the work that our educators are doing with, be it with colleagues or young people or their audiences, is really critical. This is a really perfect example.
Well, you should send her a card, because she may have made you $500,000. Okay.
I told her that. Thank you. I've never done this without you.
So thank you for that, Celeste. That's a great example, a personal example that's very helpful. But really, when you're thinking about household wealth, you need to be smart about home equity, your retirement savings, and also investment. Okay, and so I'm going to talk a little more specifically about investing behavior. One of the reasons is because I like to do that because most of my research focuses specifically on investment decision-making behavior. And so I put up this slide just as a reminder, if you're interested after the end of the webinar in looking at any of my research, you can go to my Cornell webpage, which is bogan.dyson.cornell.edu. And it has my academic research and other research regarding investment decision-making behavior. Okay, so let's talk about investments as one of the essential elements of wealth accumulation. Remember, we talked about consistently investing and the percentage of funds you have allocated to higher return in investments like stocks. Okay? So with regard to investing, that's a scary topic for a lot of people. And so, you know, there are a lot of options that I've listed here. You can put your money in stocks or bonds or safe options like CDs or mutual funds. You can invest in real estate, and there are a lot of different, we call them asset classes, for investing, and it can be a little overwhelming at times. And so I encourage people to think about how they're going to manage their investment portfolio. One option that you have is that you can speak with a financial planner. There are a lot of certified financial planners that you can contact that will really help you think through your household portfolio and where you should be investing your money. So among this laundry list, and there are other types of investments that I didn't put up there, but of all the different investment options that you have, what should you be doing? A couple of words of caution when you're trying to identify and engage a financial planner. Make sure you understand how the financial planner is compensated. There are different ways of compensation. Some financial planners, you just pay them a flat fee and they help you invest. Some financial planners have a very low fee or no fee, and they get compensated on commission for the products that they sell to you. Okay? And some are a combination or hybrid or a combination of the two. If you go with a financial planner that gets compensated based on commission, then you have to be a little more diligent in making sure that you have them explain the risks and fees associated with the investments that they're encouraging you to take. Okay? There have been some cases, and you have to be cognizant that a financial planner that's compensated based on commission may encourage you to buy a product not because it's the best thing for you to do, but because they make the most commission on this product. Okay? And so it's very important to understand the compensation and research your financial planner. Okay? And make sure that they have the appropriate credentials. I have a former student who actually is a financial planner, and you'll see him on the Household Finance 101 video series if you go to the my institute's webpage. And his rule of thumb is, you know, a third of them may not know what they're doing as much. A third of them may not be as scrupulous as they should, and a third of them really know what they're doing. And so you need to make sure that you do your appropriate due diligence to select a financial planner that's compensated in a way that is aligned with that person giving you advice that's in your best interest. The other option that you have is that you can do research on your own. We're living in an internet world where you can get any kind of information you want. Go to Yahoo Finance or Morningstar or Bloomberg, and you can find a lot of information on different kinds of investments. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming if you don't have a finance or technical background to interpret or process that information. So a lot of people do both. They have a financial planner, but they also do research and investigate the investments that they're encouraged to buy. I mentioned before that stock holdings are an important aspect of wealth accumulation. So at the top of our talk, we said, you know, one of the essential elements is consistently investing, and the percentage of your holdings that are in higher return types of investments. And those higher return types of investments generally mean stocks. Okay? But it's important to emphasize that any money that you have invested in the stock market should not be money that you'll need to access in the next couple of years. And the reason I say that is because the stock market is for long-term investors. If you put money in the stock market that you need to get out in 6 months, you really shouldn't put it in. You need to have the time and the luxury to ride out the ups and downs of the stock market. The stock market is going to go up and down. There are ebbs and flows to the stock market. So you need to have enough time to be able to take your money out when it's optimal, when your stock has gone up in value. And so you don't want to cash out your stock when it's gone down. And I'll talk about that again in a second. It's also important to consider that this includes any money that you have in 401k or IRA accounts. Okay? Those retirement accounts, if you have one, you're constantly putting money into it, and you can direct your those funds to certain types of investment. If you're going to be retiring in the next year, any new money that you put in may or may not need to go into equities or higher risk types of investments. And so again, that's one of the critical aspects to think about, something to talk about with your financial planner. Even the money that you have in retirement accounts, how is that allocated? Okay. I make a point, I do a lot of talks, and I make a point of not giving specific investment advice. So I give no, hot stock tips. But I do give the following cautions to to people when I give presentations. It is very, very tempting when the stock market starts to go down to try to cash out. And that is the absolute worst time to cash out of the stock market. Okay, you probably heard the, buy low, sell high. Everybody's heard that, phrase before when it comes to the stock market. And that's what people should do, but that's not what people actually do from my research and the analysis. What people do is when the stock market starts to go down, you get scared and you just take your money out and you cash out when it's low. And you're saying, oh, well, the stock market's low, I'm not going to buy anything. That's actually the best time to buy when values are very low. Okay, during low points, you want to just hold on to what you have. That's not the time to cash out, and hopefully you can ride it back up. And during low points, it's also important to look for opportunities to buy undervalued stocks. This is when low points in the stock market, that's when you can get bargains. Think about it in terms of bargain shopping. The other thing that I have highlighted there in red is to watch out for investment biases, and this is a big focus of my research. And by investment biases, I'll talk about, I have a few of them listed there. They can get you to your biases, and just tendencies can often have you make bad decisions when it comes to investing strategies. For example, forecasting errors are really common. You say you do go to Yahoo Finance and you're researching a particular stock and you see the stock has been going up and up and up and up and up. A lot of people say, oh, well, it's just going to keep going up forever. That's usually not the case with regard to the data. If you're going to, watch it and you have some specific information that it is going to keep going up for a while, great. Some stocks do go up for a long period of time, but watch out for forecasting errors. What I just talked about is called extrapolation bias, where you see this trajectory of stocks going up and you assume that they're going to just continue to go up in perpetuity. Understand that that may not always be the case. Overconfidence. There's a lot of interesting research to suggest that with regard to investing behavior and financial behaviors, men are much more overconfident than women. And by overconfidence, what I mean is not that you don't know what you're doing, it's just you have a belief that your abilities are better than they actually are. The example when I talk in my class about overconfidence is when they do surveys, they ask people, how many of you in this room are above average drivers? And everybody will raise their hand. But statistically speaking, that's not the case. Half of the people have to be above average and half of the people have to be below the average, but nobody wants to think that they're a below average driver. And so it's the same thing when it comes to overconfidence. Everybody thinks, oh, I can do this, and they're more confident than they should be with regard to understanding the stock market or picking particular stocks. Another behavioral bias that influences investment choices is affect, and that's a fancy term for your gut feeling. Oh, I just have a feeling it's going to go up. Sadly, people do make their investment choices that way, but letting sort of your gut or intuition override your financial planner's advice or the analysis you've done or the data is often not the best idea. So I'm going to ask another question at this time. How would you classify the distinction between investing and saving? And I'll tell you my distinction in a second.
So if you could take a moment and just chime in, what's the distinction between investing and saving? And so while they're responding to that, I'll ask again. I think the whole idea of the video shorts is fantastic, and I can see how that would be very useful to staff and to educators. And so would that be okay if folks pointed like from their website to those videos? That's just what they're for, right? So that alone, that resource, I think will be very super useful to staff that are working in this this topical area. And you guys can chime in if you have questions about that or if you think that would be helpful. But for now, if you could take a moment and write in distinction between investing and savings, or how you maybe what you share with others that you're working with about that distinction. This is the group participation part. It's so much more interesting when, the whole webinars are great, and the engagement is challenging, and mostly because you just can't see you.
Yeah, this is a different
experience
for me. Yeah, in the classroom, I can look out, I can see questions even before they have them. I can see on their faces, oh, they have a question.
All right, we're getting responses. Thank you, guys. Investing is putting your money into something specific. Saving is keeping it available to you. Investing, managing money for a return. Saving, setting aside money for future use. Investments are for the long-range goals. Saving is for emergencies and immediate needs. So there's a few responses.
Awesome. I knew this was a great group.
They are a great group. Yeah.
This is a smart group. This is a sharp group. And from my perspective, I make a very similar distinction that we heard in the responses. Investing is long-term. Saving is more in the short and medium term in terms of access to the funds. And so when you think about saving, you need to think about savings goals, and somebody just mentioned it in the response. This is something that I always like to mention when I talk about household finance is save a specific % of your monthly income for an emergency fund. You need to save up for at least 6 to 8 months worth of expenses in reserve. And especially, this is a nice thing to suggest when you're doing budgeting and household planning education. That needs to be part of the budget is, how much am I going to set aside each month for my emergency fund? I think this is really important from a financial perspective, but also just from a peace of mind perspective. You need a buffer in case something happens. You lose your job, you want to quit your job, the boiler in your house blows up. You need to have an emergency fund, money in reserve. You also need to think about beyond your emergency fund, what are my savings goals? Am I going to want to buy a house in the near future? If so, I'm going to need to start saving up for down payment. The days with no money down for houses, those are over. That happened a lot during the real estate bubble before the Great Recession, where you could get a home without putting any, 5, 10, 20% down. That's not the case now. So saving for a house down payment is something that you need to put in your plan. And also this contributes to eventual wealth if you're going to be buying a home, building equity. That's important. Do you have kids that you want them to go to college? So do I want to help my children pay for college? That's another thing that you need to think about when you're setting your savings goals. There are a few specific vehicles that you can use to save for your children's college education. I don't think I have time to talk about those, but again, there's some videos and resources on the IBHF website that I would direct you to if you're specifically interested in college savings. Another thing, and I'm sure you educators are already doing this when you talk about budgeting and financial planning is encouraging people and households to set aside money before they spend anything. Set realistic goals. If you set unrealistic goals, chances are you'll give up, you're not going to meet them. Slow and steady wins the race. And it allows you, starting early, allows you to take advantage of what I call the magic of compound interest. We saw that a little bit with the example with retirement savings. It's the same thing with other savings. And so that's really sort of the major components that you need to think about and understand with regard to wealth accumulation. And so let's turn our attention to the other aspect that I wanted to talk about, which is debt reduction. And so I have another question here. I know a lot of you are educators. What kinds of questions do you have to field regarding debt reduction? What are the issues that households have with regard to their debt?
What do you think? What do you hear about? People are probably madly typing right now. All right, questions are coming in. Super. Responses. Do they try to set up repayment plans on their own or use a credit counseling agency? Should I pay off debt or save for an emergency fund? They ask whether the level of debt in the household is reasonable or maybe excessive. So.
Okay, those are interesting. Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to address some of those types of questions. I think before you get into debt versus savings, we need to think about a debt reduction plan. And the first step, I think, I'll answer the question that was posed, that was mentioned. I'm not a huge fan of the credit counselor because and some of them are better than others, but some of them have historically not worked in the best interest of the person or client in terms of getting the best option. It is entirely possible for individuals to sort of negotiate different terms if they're in trouble. But the first step with a debt reduction plan is really just to understand what type of debt you have. And the reason for this is that not all debt is created equal. If you have a home and you have a first mortgage, that's, as debt goes, that's not bad debt, because the interest is tax deductible. There's some benefits. You have the option to refinance the debt if interest rates go down. You can shorten the term if you want. So a first mortgage, not a bad kind of debt. But you need to understand the terms of all of your loans. And by terms, I mean, what's the interest rate on each and every one of my loans, and how long is, what's the outstanding, when is this loan going to mature? And there's an interesting article in Scientific American, and the link to the article is on the Institute's Twitter about debt reduction. And in that, they talk about, oftentimes the tendency is, oh, I'll just pay off this really low interest rate loan first because it's a small amount and I just want to get rid of the loan. But the idea is that you pay off the highest interest rate loan first. You write all your loans down in a spreadsheet or on a piece of paper. You put the interest rate in the next column. You put the terms in the next column, and you start paying off the highest interest rate loan first. And when I mean pay off, I mean pay beyond the minimum. It's a given that you pay the minimum on all the loans that you have all the time, because you don't want to affect your credit score, which we'll talk about in a second. You need to make sure that you have a debt reduction plan and pay off the highest interest rate loan first. I'm running a little short on time, so bear with me while I just speed through a couple. I think I've already touched on home loans in terms of first mortgages being not bad debt, but just understanding interest payments tax deductible, you're building equity or buying an asset and you can refinance. Home equity loans, very different. Interest not tax deductible. Their interest rates are generally higher than with first mortgages and you can't refinance those. I generally discourage people from taking a home equity loan to go on a vacation or something like that, which is encouraged by financial institutions. Not a good idea. The home equity loans are fine to get you out of a jam, but they're not equivalent to first mortgages. They are slightly better than credit card debt. Credit card debt is bad. Usually those are the highest interest rates that you have to get. You need to encourage households to pay off as quickly as possible, not just making the minimum payment, but getting in the habit of paying your credit cards off in full every month, or getting the debt down as quickly as you can. I try to encourage people never to revolve credit card debt, meaning just paying the minimum payment. Most purchases can wait until you have the money and can pay it off in full. And if it's an emergency, that's what you have the emergency fund for. The example that I give why I think credit card debt is not great is that, even if you have a modest balance of $5,000, you have a 14% APR and a minimum payments of 2% of your balance, how long do you think it would take to pay off the debt, and how much would you pay? Well, if you just pay the minimum, it's going to take you over 2 decades to pay off that $5,000, and you're going to pay twice as much.
That's another great example. Those two slides with the examples of a difference is, really, I think, super example to, especially to young people or some of our clients. So
exactly, and what I say is, people say, well, I put it on my credit card because I got it on sale. And I said, it doesn't matter. You get it on sale. Whatever you bought is going to be in a landfill by the time you finish making that last payment, because it's going to be 22 years later. And so, again, that underscores the point that I made before about not revolving credit card debt, paying off your credit cards in full. I know I'm running short of time, and so maybe we can stop here.
Yeah, I think this is a good pause, and I'm just gonna
take the last few questions.
Yeah, so if you want to jot in some questions that you have, we're gonna go back to WebEx screen. Not showing up. Hopefully it decides to in a moment here. Kind of interesting. Stick with me here, folks. My WebEx is not responding, but I think folks are still on. What is that? There we go. All right. So I want to just take a moment to do a couple of things. First, I know we have some representatives from the Family Economics Resource Management Program working on, and that they have an upcoming event that they wanted to encourage folks to participate in. And this is the Cornell Law School's Clinic, Avoiding Scams and Investment Fraud, on March 17th at 1 o'clock. It will be on WebEx, and some more details are forthcoming. I'll forward that on to the program development listserv, which hits all of our educators. So I wanted to take a moment and showcase that. Second, the screen that's up right now, which is the promo that was sent to you about Vicki's talk here today, will remain up on the Campus County Connections website. That's where I'll post the recording of today's webinar, and the link to Vicki's website is there as well. I'd encourage you to check that out. Check out the video shorts. I think that they will be super helpful, especially if you're working in this line of work. And the handle, Vicki's handle for her Twitter is also up there. So, you know, if you tweet, if you Twitter, use Twitter, follow her on Twitter. She was tweeting right before we got started. So
exactly.
Twitter user. So, let's see, the last thing I want to share is we have the Campus County Connections webinar series is ongoing. So we have a webinar coming up next month, and of course it's not showing up here right now. Can't tell you exactly what that is because I'm not remembering, because next week is the Gen 2016 virtual conference. So there's a variety of webinars coming next week as well. So I hope that you'll continue to join us. So I want to make sure that I get back to, there's a couple questions that popped up. Didn't get an answer to my 401 question. Does an employer have to contribute?
It depends on the employer.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the program. They don't necessarily have to set up a 401k with a corporate match. Most do.
Okay. Is there more information about that, or can somebody follow up with you directly if they have more?
Yes.
Okay. And your email address is?
VLB
23. I'll put that in the chat.
At Cornell.
Okay. There you go. Super. And Nancy encourages everybody to join for, you know, so look for an announcement about avoiding scams and investment fraud. And thank you for this excellent webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, what a joy. It's always fun to meet somebody new, learn about some new research, and just a potential resource for cooperative extension staff. So thanks so much for taking the time for us.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And I'll post a webinar as soon as I get it transferred to, you know, converted to an MP4 format. So it should be by the end of this week or early next week. Thanks, folks.